It is Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball, and they're all the players wearing the number 42. And so we're bringing in former Major League Baseball player, uh, just an expert on the game. You hear him on here a lot with Foul or Fair. It's our man Rod Allen to talk about Jackie Robinson and his legacy. Rod, thank you for
What's
joining
up,
us, man.
Rod?
Hey, what's going on, guys? How you doing today?
Doing
We are
great,
good, brother. How are
yes.
you?
I'm fabulous. I mean, how could you not be on a day like today? I mean,
No
I hear
74
you.
doubt.
years ago, I mean, Jackie integrated the game, allowed him. He played, and it's just wonderful. I mean, the conversations that have taken place since then. So, looking forward to having a conversation with you guys today.
Yeah, Rod, we should just kick it off and start by just saying, what does Jackie Robinson mean to you? And when do you remember first hearing about Jackie Robinson and the legend of him and his legacy? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Santa Monica, California, and I grew up a Dodgers fan. I mean, so obviously Jackie played for the Dodgers, albeit the Brooklyn Dodgers. So,
Right.
I mean, back in school, I mean, you used to do projects on Jackie and book reports on Jackie and different things like that. And then for a kid like myself to leave there at age 17 and embark on a professional career at 17, and then it would expand 43 years. And, you know, obviously every single year we talk about Jackie Robinson and 42 and being a broadcaster, and you guys know that too, and just all that it means. And but then when you look a little deeper, the person that he was, and you know the father that he was, and the husband that he was, and you know it's just so much. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of different people all day long today, and there's so many ways that you can honor this man, but. He was just special. I mean, he was really special, and he's the reason why he's got his day.
You played obviously in Major League Baseball 3 years. You're a broadcaster, been around the game a long time at the pro level. You know how tough and challenging it is. When you put on top of all the normal challenges
Yes.
that are there for a major league player, just playing at that level, can you imagine doing it when you've got the racial animus and hatred that Jackie Robinson faced, and then you're carrying the black community on your back? Everybody's pulling for you to represent them the right way, and so on and so forth. Like, can you imagine just the burden that he had to carry? And obviously, he did it with so much class and grace.
No, I mean, I can't even imagine it, but I mean, he is the reason why so many of us have been able to stay in the game and be in the game for so many years. But the one thing about Jackie, and he said this, he and Branch Rickey, it wasn't about him breaking the color barrier. It wasn't about him being the first. It really wasn't about him and him not being able to fight back. It was about them winning. They felt like he was going to help them win a championship. So first and foremost, Jackie was a winner. And that's what he was about. And then because of his education growing up on the West Coast and going to UCLA, he was probably in tune with different, you know, dynamics of just culture that sometimes a lot of people aren't integrated, you know, the way that you are on the West Coast.
Right.
But he was just special in that way. And it wasn't about, you know, the color barrier for him. It was about winning. And it turned into the color barrier as everything does. But yeah, he was a winner.
The other thing that I think when I think of Jackie Robinson and think where we are, the idea that, you know, and this hasn't happened in any other sport where, you know, a player's number has been retired throughout the league, and it talks about the importance. It talks about this is 20 some odd years before the civil rights, you know, like what 1947 was like for black people and what it meant. And you're right about his ability to play and try to win a championship for Brooklyn, but it meant a lot. I remember reading stories, Rod, even in Detroit. Detroit had a racist owner. I can't remember his name off the top. Briggs was, I think, because
Yep.
it used to be called Briggs Field or Briggs Stadium. And when when black players would come to town, Chris, he would charge for the bleachers if black people wanted to come in 3 and 4 times more, you know, to try to keep them from coming to the ball games. And black people would pay because they wanted to see the black players come through Detroit and play. And it just tells me that, you know, how important the game was. What Jackie back then, everybody was a Dodger fan, you know, just about. because
Yeah,
am I right, Rod? That's how
you're
important
right.
it
Right.
was.
Right, but when you look back, I mean, you look at what the players are doing today. I mean, and I don't think it's all the African American players because I went to a Players Alliance event, during the pandemic, and they were passing out gloves in the inner city, and just passing out a lot of love. Dontrell Willis was there, Justin Upton was there. I mean, there's so many guys. I can't even mention them all, but they were all there, and I was there with them. But all those players on this day, they're donating their salaries to the
That's
Players Alliance
unbelievable.
so they can continue to further the game and start to put gloves in kids' hands and bats in kids' hands. And not only that, I mean, these guys are going around as ambassadors and talking the game of baseball. I mean, anything you got Curtis Granderson's name on it, it's going to be special. And he's pretty much the guy that's heading this whole operation. And,
Right.
there's a lot of other guys that are doing a lot of special things, but Granderson's a top-notch individual. And I applaud the Players Alliance on what they're doing as far as their salary is concerned. But that's how special Jackie was to the game. I mean, they're taking this day to donate their salaries to continue to give back and further the game.
Rod, I was reading an article in USA today, and it talked about how we all have seen the decline of African American participation in baseball. They said opening day the rosters were 7.1% African American, which is obviously very low. And it's been on the decline for a while. Why do you think that the decline happened? Why more blacks aren't playing baseball like they used to?
Well, I mean, when I came up, I mean, I'm just going to go there first. I mean, I was drafted in 1977 out of Santa Monica High School in the 6th round by the Chicago White Sox. And when I went to Florida, we shared a complex with the Astros and the Expos. And guys like Tim Raines were down there that same year. So you had a complex of 3 different teams because you all played at the same facility. And there was a lot of African-American kids that were there. And when I got to the big leagues, finally in 82, I think we had 26, 27% African-Americans. But, Chris, that's a question that so many have asked, and that's a question that Major League Baseball has continued to deal with. I mean, you could talk about the kids not getting a chance to play because the game has gotten so expensive, whether the parents are involved in the game. There's so many different angles that you could take with it. But the bottom line is I think that what you asked me, the question, it's on the radar. And Major League Baseball has hired people to hire other people to try to help in communities, to bring awareness to the game. And, it's a complicated question. I mean, so you're asking me something I really don't have the answer to, but I know it's on the forefront of what everything Major League Baseball is trying to do as far as equality and what's going on in our society these days.
I also think, this is my own theory, is that part of it is, you reap what you sow. And about 20 years ago, baseball decided it was going to do baseball academies in Latin America. It was just cheaper, Rod, to not have to pay people up front from this country with agents and lawyers and all kinds of stuff, and you go down there and get a kid, and baseball will pay you once you get to the big level. Now, I don't care what color you are. If you could play, you saw what they gave Tatis. He's not even eligible, right? And they gave him $300 million. So they'll pay you if you can make it, but they don't want to give you that big bonus up front. And I think when they started doing that, outsourcing jobs, I call it, and that's where you started to get a bigger number of Latin players and Hispanic players, but I think there's definitely, I agree with you that Major League Baseball has done a lot to push this forward, and that's really why I started MLBBro.com as well, because baseball is a part of our community. It always has been. Look at the record books, man. We're all over it, and we only started in 1947. We could play baseball, so it's about, you know what I mean, Rod? That's not the issue. It's about getting these kids back into it.
Where I grew up in California, baseball used to be the first sport. It wasn't necessarily basketball. It wasn't necessarily football. I mean, baseball. Everybody played baseball. We played over the line. We played strike 'em out. We played wiffle ball.
Home run.
We played a lot of baseball back in the day, man. And you just don't see that anymore. You don't go outside. You don't see kids throwing balls around up against the garage and different things like that. I don't care what color you are. You just don't see it.
They don't do that.
Different.
Right.
I mean, they got those iPads in their hands, man. They got those phones in their hands. I mean, times have changed. I mean, it's just a whole different generation, man. But, Rob, I think what you said about the academies, baseball has tried to catch up as far as the academies are concerned. But they've been doing that in Latin America for a number of years. And I
Right.
think they started at a younger age over there as well. Whereas most of the American-born parents, their kids are going to go to school. They're not going to go to academies to learn baseball. I mean, you have to make sure they're going to school too. So I just think, like I said, I think baseball is going in the right direction and trying to, correct it as much as they can.
Yeah, I think part of it too is that these sports have become year round. And so younger ages are specializing. So like basketball now, your coaches, they want you to play it year round. Or football year round almost. They got spring
Chris?
ball and stuff like that.
You're
and
right,
baseball too to some degree. So I think
but
they're
didn't we
forcing
just
kids
see
to
with
pick.
Kyler Murray? I mean, this is
there's
the
outliers. I mean,
right.
like Kyler
but I'm
Murray,
saying,
Justin
but Kyler Murray
Fields,
was the first player
Russell
ever
Wilson
to be drafted first round baseball and first round NFL. I mean, that wasn't 20 years ago. That should tell kids too that the AAU coaches and people are trying to convince them that they have to play only one sport. Most of the greatest athletes in any individual sport, Rod, played multiple sports. They didn't play one
doubt.
sport.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
Jordan
Chris
was
brings
a
up a great
baseball
point.
player. Yep.
Chris brings up a great point where he says that most kids are being forced into playing one sport because that coach is telling you if you miss practices, if you're playing football and
Right.
you want to be on the basketball team, then you're not going to be able to come out here and play. But the bottom line is exactly what Rob said. If you can look at most of these baseball rosters in the big leagues, and most of these guys were stars on Friday night on football in high school. They were good basketball players. They obviously were good baseball players too. And then you can look at some of these football players, and they were good baseball players and basketball players in high school as well. So the guy, because you learn so many different motor skills from playing basketball versus football and versus baseball, and even soccer. Soccer teaches you a lot when you're young as far as your foot and your coordination.
Rod, let me ask you this off of moving away from the Jackie Robinson conversation. Rob and I were talking about this earlier in the week. In the Atlantic League, they're going to experiment with moving the pitcher's mound back 12 inches away from the plate. So I don't know if you saw that, but
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
So they're trying to get more balls in play, ground balls, singles, things like that for more action. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, you've already had two no-hitters thrown. I mean, Musgrove threw a no-hitter. Rodon, threw a no-hitter the other day. I mean, clearly pitchers are throwing harder. I mean, 99, 100 miles an hour. And clearly batters are pretty –
let me finish. 99 miles an hour.
Let me finish. I mean, and then you have hitters that are pretty much, hitting the ball out of the ballpark. I mean, it's because it's like, I mean, you're not going to get a lot of hits off of these guys that are throwing as hard as they're throwing. And the hitters are not trying to get base hits. They're trying to just hit home runs because pretty much that's what you got to do to try to win the game. So with that being said, I mean, I kind of get where they're going. They're trying to do some things to maybe put more balls in play. But I don't think this is the answer. I mean, it's always been 60 feet, 6 inches. And, hopefully it can stay 60 feet, 6 inches. But I just think they're just trying. Bottom line is they feel like the pitchers are just that much dominant that they have to help the hitters.
You think it's more of an approach? Because Rob and I talked about like the launch angles and guys are going for home runs. You think it's more the batter's approach or that the pitchers have just moved too far ahead of the hitters?
It could be a combination of both. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I know most guys that, in the big leagues are throwing those fastballs at, 98 miles an hour around the chest. And I know most hitters nowadays, they can handle that pitch up there. And I do think that there's a lot of it that's because of the launch angle and the way the guys are, being taught to hit. But at the same time, I mean, guys are throwing 100 miles an hour. You might as well take that one shot and try to hit it as far as you can. They used to say swing hard in case you hit it. That still applies. What do you think about it? I know I'm the baseball guy, but I mean, that's a great question, that last question. I mean, do you think if guys kind of changed their approach and choked up and just tried to hit base hits, they'd be much better?
Rod, if you struck out 175 times or 150 times, you would have been sent back to the minor leagues, and they don't care anymore.
You got to release.
Am I right? You know it.
Well, that's what right. So that would speak to the approach of the hitting, just the way the game's changed. But I agree. Dudes are obviously
that's why a guy like DJ LeMahieu is so special. is because he still plays that old school game, gets on top of the baseball, hits balls hard through the infield. He beats all these shifts, good contact, chokes up a little bit, grinder. And there's a few other guys like that in the big leagues that have that same kind of approach, but that's their approach. But the approach that most guys get rewarded for is the lift and separate approach to hit home runs and strike out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, look, great conversation, man. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Rod.
it, Rod. Really great on all the different topics we threw at you, man. So we appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, guys. You know you're my guys.